Welcome on in, golf fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our DFS and betting preview for this week's Tour Championship. Got to break down what to expect from the newly renovated East Lake Golf Club, as well as my custom modeling some of my top DFS plays and outright bets of the week to go out there and get some exposure for the Super Bowl of our golf season. Of course, a few different markets that we're going to be looking at when it comes to those outrights. One with the starting strokes, one bet I'm taking from that side, and then without the starting strokes, a few players that I've got my eye on and that I'm trying to include in some DFS lineups. So you'll get a good taste for what I'm looking for in my exposure this week and the sort of players that I'm including out there in my lineup. So a lot to talk about here. Let's start it off with the golf course and our modeling for this week, which with the newly renovated golf course is going to be a heated discussion amongst the golf community. I've already got a full course breakdown up that goes through all the hole by hole changes that you're going to see around East Lake. But when I ended up concluding on that video, and if you've already seen it, you know what I'm going to say here is that we don't really know what to expect from East Lake Golf Club. I think trying to guess how it's going to play after renovation is just a fool's errand, but in general, there are a few things that we know you're going to get here in 2024. So first off, a longer golf course, that's worth noting, and then also it's going to be a par 71 as opposed to a par 70. So the big change is hole 14, which was taken from about a 530-yard par 4. It plays downhill, so it's a lot shorter than that in reality, to about a 580-yard par 5. So that is going to lead to some more scoring towards the end of your round. You've got 14 as a par 5, also 16, 17 that can be, I don't want to call them birdie holes, but definitely ones where you can pick up a shot. And then the closing par 5 there at 18. So I think it's going to make for a very interesting, entertaining finish to all of these rounds. But in terms of the golf course fit, the other big difference is going to be the firmness of this golf course. It is already usually a little bit bouncy this time of year. We got 90 to 100 degree temperatures this time of year in Atlanta, but this year, because of the new turf that was laid down, just like what we got at the Wells Fargo Championship, where Quail Hollow was a little bit harder this year because of the bouncy greens, we're going to get that same effect over there in 2024 in East Lake. So it's going to be even firmer, even faster than what we're used to seeing in the past. Maybe the rough will be a little bit sparser because it was just planted over the last few months, but this golf course is likely going to be a lot harder this year. So the one thing I guess you can account for is that this golf course is not going to be as scoreable as what we've seen over the last few years. And it's not like East Lake was an easy golf course to begin with. So it's a great test for the world's best players, right? A great test for the final week of the season. And in terms of how it affects our modeling, I'm trying to keep it as simple as humanly possible. As I mentioned, we don't really know how this golf course is going to play. So you'll see I only have 6 stats out there in my modeling. We've got the big 4 shots gained metrics. Number 1 for me would be approach. 2 would be off the tee. Then I've got putting and around the green, rounding it out there. And then I'm adding birdie or better percentage to try and find some of your top fantasy scorers, which of course placement points, the starting strokes are going to have a huge impact on play this week. But the fantasy scoring aspect, going out there trying to make 20 birdies over 4 rounds, is also going to be the much bigger contributor out there to your fantasy stats. So I think birdie or better percentage is always something you want to look at a no-cut event. And then I'm also looking at the old stuff at East Lake. Though I do think there will be a lot of changes here in 2024, there's also going to be a lot that is similar about East Lake to the past. That would be the agronomy. Though it is a different strain of zoysia, also a different grain of strain, I should say, of Bermuda grass out there on the greens, it's still going to be Bermuda grass greens that they're putting on out there. Zoysia grass fairways, it's going to be the same kind of setup for a golf course, maybe different yardages, different angles out there with your tee shots or approaches, but the same general golf course. So I think that if you're completely throwing out the course history, that you're making a mistake. I also think it's a mistake to completely use it 1-to-1 as what we had in the past, but you can see it's down there at number 6 in my modeling. So a very simple week. I'd say your approach profile, we're looking at from 150 to 200, a little bit more than usual. Off the tee, I would say accuracy and distance is always going to be helpful. A few potentially drivable par 4s in the new setup that they're going with. Bermuda grass putting, something that I'm personally including out there with my putting stats. But outside of that, everything is very bland. It's very vanilla when it comes to my modeling there. And frankly, anytime we get a new course or a new renovation like what we have here, I usually think that's the best way to go about it. So of course, guys, if you want all the modeling, all the actual weights in my modeling over there, make sure to check out the version on my Patreon page. But it's real straightforward. I don't think you have to go crazy with the modeling this week. You want to find guys that are in form, and if anything, on top of these key stats, I'm looking for guys with a high apex height with their irons. Now, the reason why you don't see me including it as a stat out here is that apex height is a driving stat on the PGA Tour website. I see so many people including it out there with their irons and whatnot, but in reality, that apex height that you're finding on databases is all about the off the tee play. That's where they have the TrackMans, it's where they're taking that kind of data, whereas the apex height that we care about this week would be into greens, because with the firm and fastness, with how hard it's going to be to hold these green complexes, that is the far more important aspect of golf. Going out there, guys like J Day that hit it a mile high, a Rory McIlroy, a Xander Schauffele that can hit the ball higher than most players, are going to be at a distinct advantage when trying to access some of those front pin locations when it is going to be as bouncy as what we get this week. So the reason why it's not in my modeling over here is that your stat databases, your PGAtour.com is not going to have apex height out there on the website, or at least the apex height that we're looking for. So it's more so something that you can add as more of a like observational thing, right? Maybe not a database thing that you're including in your modeling, but maybe a little bit of a extra thing that you're adding on top. So that being said, let's go through some of our exposure for this week. So not going crazy with the modeling, and the one bet that I took with the starting strokes is going to be Xander Schauffele to win. He was plus 220 on Hard Rock Bet, which was not the best number, but with the little 10% boost that you can use on that site, which they're seemingly giving out like candy at this point to all of their users, I got him up to plus 242. So it's not like the best odds, not the worst odds out there in the industry either. And considering his track record around East Lake, I mean, the guy is the most under par by far of the people at this golf course. $11,000 is also a little bit cheaper than Scotty Scheffler. His form is just as good, if not better, if we're looking at the right categories. Just a whole lot of reasons you'd want to play as Xander Schauffele, and I think the most compelling reason to want to use him here is that he's been finishing top 5. He's been nearly winning golf tournaments lately without his best stuff. He's looked off. He's looked like he's had so much room for improvement the last 2-3 events. I mean, he hasn't even been playing that well per his own standards, and when you take a look at the finishes, I mean, how could you doubt the guy? T5 at the BMW, T2 at the St. Jude, and he really wasn't even in it out there until the last few holes. Open Championship, of course, won, but like even the Scottish in that T15, where most people would be thrilled with that kind of performance, that's the down week for him lately. So starting at -8 with those starting strokes, I'd rather have him than a Scotty because he's a better Bermuda grass putter. He's coming in with just as good, if not better form. And when you take a look at the shots gained metrics, I think what stands out is that he's a little bit more well balanced than Scotty Scheffler. Of course, he gains in all 4 categories as opposed to just 3 out of the 4 out there with Scotty. But you can see here, everything is over a third of a stroke per round. Scotty a little bit more ball striking heavy, and at a golf course that is playing this firm and fast. Greens, by the way, are going to be diabolical by the time they get to Sunday and they're running, maybe even 13 on the stimp meter. Guys like Scotty Scheffler might not be able to ball strike it to death when the greens are just bouncing all over the place. You kind of see that at these firm, fast, super difficult golf courses where having that short game really matters. So up top, right, you've got to pick your guy. I think you're probably going with Scotty or a Xander Schauffele out there in lineups. Fitting both into lineups is probably going to be hard to do, and you've still got to go out there and make birdies to go out there and make the optimal lineup. And when I'm trying to split hairs, we got to be nitpicky when we're trying to choose between these two options. I'd rather take the more consistent option when it comes to their shots gained metrics. So he's been a savant around East Lake. Who knows if that's going to continue going forward with all of the changes to the golf course. But just like I said before, even though there are going to be things that are changing around East Lake, there's going to be a lot that plays the same. So you can see over the last 5 years, the track record is unlike anyone else in the field. He's gone 2nd, 4th, 5th, 2nd, and 2nd his last 5 times out, has yet to crack the win, at least the last 5 years. He does have a win at East Lake Golf Club before. Maybe he can actually get that done here in 2024. It would be a great way to end the year. He had the 2 majors on the track record. And frankly, with how he's been playing lately, I think that he's the guy to beat out there in this kind of field. So he loves putting on Bermuda. I don't think it's a huge hot take to go out there and want to play Xander. In fact, with the ownership, he's likely going to be by far the highest owned player out there. But as I always say out there with GPP lineups, you've got a whole 6 spots to work with, right? One play doesn't dictate the entire ownership of your lineup. Now, if you're going with like a chalky 40-50% owned Xander, it might even be higher than 50% out there in GPP contests. If you're going to play that kind of guy, you don't mix them in with 20-30 percenters at your other 4 or 5 spots. You're going to have a few guys that are offsetting that large ownership number, but just know that if you're going out there and starting with the Xander Schauffele. So 11 grand I think is a fair enough price tag. The price tags, by the way, only go down to 6 grand this week. In the past, they had gone down to 5 grand or even $4,500 in the past, I believe. So pricing maybe not as soft as what you're hoping for, but plenty of options in that 6 and 7K range that are viable this week. Next up, we've got our first non-strokes play, and unfortunately, Hard Rock Bet doesn't have odds posted out there for the without strokes market, but Rory McIlroy, in terms of just plays this week that I think are going to go out there and play well, checks a ton of the boxes that I'm looking for. And just like Xander, he has one of the higher ball flights out there on the PGA Tour. Rory McIlroy, of course, has maybe the highest ball flight of all the people with their irons. So again, the Apex height stat isn't something I'm using in my modeling. It is something that makes these 2 plays up top even better options. And what I like with Rory is the tee to green play. And I'm a huge stat guy, right? So if I'm going to get to an option up top, it's not going to be without proper stat backing. And lately, it's been all about the flat stick holding them back. The tee to green has been into the positive with all 3 categories. That includes a really, really ugly week out there at the Fedex St. Jude that, of course, is included over his last 12 measured rounds. Despite that, he's still gaining in all 3 tee to green categories. We zoom out a little bit, we get a little bit more of a fair taste for how he's actually been playing, where you can see he's gaining closer to 2/3 of a stroke per round off the tee. Still gaining on approach, maybe not as significantly as what we'd be hoping for, but we'll talk about that here in a second. Around the green gaining, and then still, even over the last 24 measured rounds, is losing about a half a stroke putting per round. So that's been the clear bugaboo lately. It's why he's not been going out there and finishing top 5 all that often. But on some Bermuda grass greens, which of course he's from South Florida, practices down here in Jupiter during the offseason and whatnot, he's very comfortable on Bermuda. You've seen him have some really good spike performances in 2024 on the Bermuda grass surface, including over there at the Honda Classic. So I think that it in cognizant this year, I guess, out there with the name change, but $9,600 Rory, you get him back on some familiar greens. The ball striking stats have been decent enough lately. And again, that includes a really bad 4-round sample at the Fedex St. Jude. Get him on a golf course where off the tee, I think he can bombs away. The rough isn't grown in as much as it normally would be around East Lake. So I think the off the tee penalty might be a little bit less than normal this year with the high apex height, right? With the super firm and fast greens, I think he's going to have a better chance to go out there and hold those greens with how high he's able to launch his irons. Maybe find some magic on Bermuda grass, as I mentioned before. And you have the kind of capability, or you have the recipe out there for him to go out there and potentially figure it out. So $9,600, I don't think he's going to be mega chalky, and he's starting with decent starting strokes position, right? He's starting up there towards like the, I believe it's like -6 range out there to start the week. So he's in like the 3rd from last group. I mean, like I said, up there towards the leaders. Actually, he might be closer to -4 for the starting strokes. Either way, I'm not betting him with any starting strokes included. And in DFS, we're more so looking for birdie or better upside outside of the guy that we want to win, right? Like Xander, Scotty, if you're starting with one of those 2, the starting strokes really matter. But outside of that, I'm more so looking for guys I think that have a lot of birdie or better upside, that can go out there, try and make 20 plus birdies over the next 4 days. And if that lands them in contention, maybe they even take home the championship with starting strokes out there with Rory, then great, right? That'd be even better. I'm sure he'd be an even more nutted play out there for DFS if he, can go out there and do so. But what I'm more hoping for is maybe a top 5 out of this sort of player. And like I said, a lot of birdie or better upside, which of course you get with a Rory. And I think at a firm and fast course, without that really deep rough, it could be a really good spot out there for Rory McIlroy. Before we talk about our 2 value plays, do want to mention where you can find this spreadsheet completely uncensored out there for your research process, which of course is over there on my Patreon page. In the link in the description of this video, you can find my Patreon page, and on there you can join the DFS tier for just $15 a month and get direct access to all of these spreadsheets. So whether it's out there for main slate, like you can see in all the videos that I'm posting watching on my channel, or out there for Showdown and rounds 2 through 4. You can get all my projections, modeling, all of that you see censored on there in the spreadsheet out there for your own use. So you've got the recent form on there for everyone, of course, event history, which, maybe take it with a grain of salt this week with the renovation, but still out there at your disposal. You got your shots gained metrics over the last 24 rounds, last 12 rounds you can use. And of course, over there on the Patreon page as well, you can get my exact model weightings. You can see the exact proximity buckets I'm looking at, how much weight I'm putting on all these different key stats to go out there, do my modeling, go out there, identify my top plays, to replicate it yourself, or go out there, maybe tweak it, go out there, make it a little bit more in line with what you want to look for, and make your own process that way. So all of that, of course, can be of yours over there on the Patreon page. And like I said, link in the description of the video to go out there and find that Patreon page. And the DFS tier is what you want to look for if you want to find all of these spreadsheets. That'll give you the main slate stuff, all the showdown content that I'm doing. If you want all the prop stuff I'm doing, you can do the golf combined tier. That'll give you both the DFS and the prop stuff. But that's the underdog and prize pick stuff that I'm doing. So if you're watching this video, you're probably looking for the DFS tier, but I wanted to throw that out there for all my prop players as well. But let's hop into these value plays now. So down towards the bottom end of the board, plug aside at this point, we've got SunGM at $7,500. And what I like about SunGM this week is that first off, he's shown it to us at Eastlake before. So 3 years ago, I believe, when Patrick Cantlay ended up winning, if we scroll down here to SunGM, sorry, 2 years ago, I should say, he went out there and finished T2. So that was the year, I believe, that Rory McIlroy got the job done. But of course, by the way, if you look for course history, right, Rory, just like Xander, has been unbelievable around this kind of golf course. He's gone fourth, first. He also finished in first back there in 2019. It's only been really one good performance, I guess two, right? Second 2 years ago, also an 11th back there in 2020. Wasn't the worst start out there from SunGM, but he is also a player that is gaining across all four stat categories. And kind of like a Xander Schauffele, who's really excelled at this course, right? He's the kind of guy that is consistently gaining across all four stat categories. Now, Sanjay hasn't quite gone to, a Xander Schauffele's level, but if we take a look at the last 24 measured rounds, it's a very similar type of stat profile. Now, Xander's gaining like 2.5 strokes per round. Sanjay's doing the same kind of thing, doing it a very similar type of way, but only gaining about 1.5 strokes per round. So maybe it's a Wish.com version of Xander, maybe it's the Temu version, right? You're getting them for a little discount. Maybe not the same functionality, but same idea at least between the two products. They're with a $7,500 SunJM, and though he's starting much further down the starting strokes board, and he's not going to likely win this event. Could he finish top 5, top 10 out there? For sure, at $7,500. So I like the course fit in general. He has a relatively high ball flight when he's hitting his irons. He's more of like an accuracy guy off the tee than anything, but I don't think this is really a course where you have to be accurate or you have to be long off the tee. You're just looking for positive gains in that category. And even if we look at the last 12 measured rounds, you'll see that for Sanjay, right? He's gaining in 3 of the 4 stat categories. Around the green, maybe not his best stuff, but does come back to the town where he has his home base in. He is, of course, stationed out of Atlanta at this point, which I don't think is a huge boost or anything that we have to hold against him, but more so just a guy that I think is too cheap, right? $7,500 is going to save you some salary out there in your 6-player lineup. He's a good Bermuda grass putter. Again, he's shown it to us around at Eastlake before, and at, starting at, $7,500, he's the exact kind of guy I'm looking for in this range. So we'll have to see the kind of number we can get on him without the starting strokes, but I could see him having that sort of a tournament, right? Going out there, having the best round out of anyone, which might not win him the thing, but if he goes out there and he wins the thing with starting strokes, without starting strokes, just to say, he's easily going to be optimal out there in DFS. So that's why I really like him out there from the GPP format. Then the last play we're going to talk about here going to be Billy Horschel at $7,100. And in terms of form, in terms of just total model ranking even, he's the number 9 ranked play in the field despite being number 19 in the pricing. So obviously, right, a very good points per dollar play when it comes to all things out there. On Bermuda grass, he gains about a half a stroke per round, so the putting is going to be fantastic around this kind of golf course. And the shots gained approach lately has been next level stuff. You can see he's gaining in all 4 stat categories. So once again, like a Xander Schauffele light out there at the bottom end of the board, but gaining 0.82 shots gained approach per round. You may say, okay, it's just a recent thing. Not really. If you zoom out, you take a look at the last 24 measured rounds, he is still gaining across all 4 stat categories and still most significantly out there on approach, where it is just under a half a stroke gained per round. So he's found something with the irons. The one thing I'll say about Billy is that maybe not the highest apex height player, but he plays well when conditions get tough, and he also plays well on a firm and fast golf course. You saw him win the Memorial. You've seen him play well down at Bay Hill when conditions get tough, and you've even seen him lately go out there and play when conditions are tough, like Open Championship, for example, out there at Royal Troon, very firm and fast course by the end of the week, went out there and excelled on the hardest of conditions. So he's the kind of guy that I'm not expecting to have trouble with, how bouncy this golf course might be. And in terms of form, in terms of that Bermuda grass stuff that we were looking at before, really checks every box that we're looking for. And just like a Sanjay, maybe hasn't been his best in every time he's come here. Like, he's finished 30th before, right? Dead last place at Eastlake before, but he also finished top 10 3 years ago, and that's the year that Cantlay ended up winning. So that was the course history nugget that I was referring to before that I jumped the gun on a little bit out there with Sanjay. But yeah, the year that Cantlay won, which by the way was a very firm and fast and fiery version of Eastlake, is the year that he went out there and had his best year. And I can tell you right now, $7,100, if you gave me a T9 finish, which is probably something around at least 10 under par at this golf tournament, that's going to be really close to optimal. Just like if, Sanjay goes out there and finishes like top 5, top 7, he's probably going to be optimal over there at $7,500. So, outside of your guys up top, you're more so just looking for that birdie or better upside, that scoring ability down here towards the bottom. And I think Bermuda grass putting is a huge thing to hone in on. In fact, you can see that these two guys, right, are like the best putters in this range when it comes to Bermuda grass. So not a surprise that they're the guys I'm getting to out there from this fantasy scoring aspect. So just like Sanjay, just like Rory is the kind of player that I'm looking for a bet without starting strokes. And it says potential bet because I don't know what the odds are going to be. And I'm going to be on site all week. I meant to mention that a little bit earlier, but I'll be on site right at this golf course, right, taking a look at the guys on Wednesday as they're practicing. If there's anyone that I see that's really hitting the ball well or maybe grinding over it, right, maybe I try and fade the guys that are out there grinding. But if I see anyone that's really confident, there's a good chance I try and bet them out there on the golf course too. So I'm looking forward to it. Should be a really fun week ahead. Make sure to stay tuned into my Twitter for updates on that end. I'll answer any questions over there as well. And of course over there on the Patreon page where I'll be giving you guys all this content, all the spreadsheets, player pool, ownership projections when they go live over there on the Patreon, but also some behind the scenes course info that I'm getting out there as well. So make sure to check it out. Those are all the plugs aside and all for the DFS and betting preview. That's all I've got for the DFS and betting preview. Hopefully you feel a little bit more prepared out there for all of your exposure and are ready to get after it for the Tour Championship. Go ahead, smash that like button if you guys haven't already, and also go ahead and comment down below who you've got winning this week. And what we're going to do is if you can get the winner without starting strokes, you'll go ahead and win a free month of my Patreon. And I was going to say, might cut it off in terms of odds, but it'll be first come, first serve. Obviously, 30 players in the field. Once somebody is taken once, they cannot be taken again. So if you think Scotty is going to win without the starting strokes, then go ahead, take him for that bet. The one thing I'll say is if you're starting at -10, maybe a little bit tougher to win it without the starting strokes, but who knows? Maybe he does end up boat racing the field. So feel free, go ahead, give me your best guess down below, and may the best person win a free month of that Patreon. But that's all I've got, guys. I appreciate the support here on the channel as per usual. Like I said, smash that like button if you haven't already. Also subscribe to the channel if you haven't so you don't miss any of the content to come. That'll include a Wednesday live stream at 7 p.m. Eastern time. That'll be from up in Atlanta after I've walked the golf course, seen what it has to offer. We'll go over the last second weather information, any of your questions down in chat. We'll talk about what I saw out there at the golf course and all that pertinent information before lock. So subscribe, as I said, so you don't miss that. Also, the showdown content, the prop content for rounds 2 through 4. You'll want to stay tuned for all of that as well. And as I said, best of luck with everything that you guys decide to get to, whether it's a GPP lineup or two. I'd love to see you guys take down a contest for me, whether it's an outright bet. Let's go out there, cash a few of those. And when we get to the prop side of things, which I'm especially excited for, being able to do a little bit of reconnaissance, a little intel searching out there at the golf course, super excited to get after that as well. So check out the Patreon page if you haven't already. Enter the giveaway for the Patreon as well if you guys haven't already taken your player. And like I said, first come, first serve. So early bird gets the worm. Get out there, select your player, and let's have a week, guys.